What happens when a music legend sits down for what should be a warm and easy conversation, only for it to spiral into one of the most tense and uncomfortable moments in late-night TV history? Tonight, we're breaking down the explosive interview between Elton John and Stephen Colbert that left the crowd in stunned silence and the internet completely divided. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments whose side you're on in this confrontation, because trust me, you'll definitely have opinions. The Late Show studio was buzzing with excitement. Elton John, the legendary Rocket Man himself, was there to talk about his new documentary and reflect on his incredible 5-decade career. The audience was packed, the energy was alive, and Stephen Colbert walked out with his signature charm and wit, ready to celebrate one of the greatest musicians of all time. Colbert started warmly, shaking Elton's hand as the audience erupted in applause. "Sir Elton John, welcome back to The Late Show. It's always such a pleasure to have you here." Elton smiled, settling comfortably in his chair, the way someone does when they've been interviewed thousands of times. "Thank you, Stephen. Always good to be here." "Now, your new documentary has been making quite the impact," Colbert began, leaning forward with real interest. "It's deeply personal, incredibly honest. You don't hold back about your struggles, your recovery, your relationships. What made you decide that now was the right time to be so open with your fans?" Elton adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. "Well, I think when you reach a certain stage in life, you realize that honesty is worth more than any image you've tried to maintain. I've lived a very public life, and not all of it has been pleasant. But those tough moments, those painful experiences, they made me who I am today." "That's beautifully said," Colbert replied. "And speaking of your journey, one of the most striking moments in the documentary is when you talk about addiction and recovery. You've been sober for over 3 decades now, which is remarkable." "Thank you," Elton nodded. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most rewarding." That's when the conversation began to shift, almost imperceptibly. Colbert, trying to dig a little deeper, asked a question that sounded innocent enough. "In the documentary, you mentioned that you felt the music industry sometimes enabled your worst habits. Do you think the people around you, your management, your friends, do you think they failed you during that time?" There was a slight pause. Elton's expression changed ever so slightly, but those paying close attention could sense the air in the room shift. "That's a complicated question, Stephen. I don't think it's right to say anyone failed me. I made my own choices." "But surely," Colbert pressed, "there were people who could have stepped in, people who might have said something." "When someone is spiraling the way you described, don't those who care have a responsibility to intervene?" Elton's jaw tightened. "People did try to step in eventually, but you have to understand, when you're in that state, when you're deep in addiction, you become very skilled at hiding it, at manipulating situations. I don't blame anyone but myself for what happened." "But," Colbert continued, "it sounds like the industry itself allows this kind of thing to happen. It almost feels designed to burn people out. And we've seen it over and over. Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Prince. When do we start holding the industry accountable for creating those environments?" The question hung heavy in the air. Elton took a breath, his tone noticeably cooler. "Stephen, I get what you're trying to do, but I didn't come here to have a debate about the music business. I came here to talk about my documentary, about my life now, about the positive things I'm doing." Colbert raised his hands in a calming gesture. Of course. I'm not trying to make it political. I'm just interested in your take as someone who's lived through it." "My perspective," Elton said firmly, "is that I take responsibility for my actions. And while, yes, there are problems in every industry, I don't think it helps anyone to sit here pointing fingers at people who aren't present to defend themselves." The audience grew silent. The earlier energy had vanished, replaced by uneasy tension. Colbert seemed to realize he had hit a nerve, but instead of backing off, he tried to push through. "I understand. I just think your voice carries a lot of weight. When you speak on these issues, people listen, and maybe young artists could benefit from hearing your honest thoughts about the darker side of fame." Elton's eyes narrowed slightly. "I have been honest. It's in the documentary. It's in my autobiography. I've been talking about these things for 30 years. What more do you want from me, Stephen? The audience shifted awkwardly. Colbert gave a nervous laugh. I'm not saying you haven't been honest. I'm just saying maybe there's more to explore, more we can learn about protecting artists. Protecting artists? Elton repeated, his voice sharper. You want to talk about that? Then maybe we should start with how the media treats them, how interviewers ask invasive questions under the excuse of concern, how every small mistake or human moment becomes fuel for gossip and headlines. Colbert's smile faltered. That's a fair criticism of the media, but I like to think what we do here is different. We try to have genuine conversations. Is that what this is? Elton shot back. Because right now it feels like you're trying to bait me into saying something controversial, to fit whatever story you want for tonight's show. The tension was thick. Colbert sat back, trying to steady the situation. Sir Elton, that's not what I'm trying to do. I respect you and your work enormously. I just ask questions that I think matter. Important to who? Elton asked coldly. To your audience? To your ratings? Or to me and my story? Colbert opened his mouth, but Elton wasn't done. You see, this is the problem. I come here. I open up about my life. I'm vulnerable. And then it gets twisted into sound bites and headlines that have nothing to do with what I actually said. I get that, Colbert said, trying to sound calm. And I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. That was never my goal. Elton studied him, then sighed. I know it wasn't your goal, but good intentions don't erase bad impact, do they? The room was silent. The audience wasn't sure whether to clap or hold their breath. Colbert nodded. You're right. It's a reminder that even when we mean well, we need to think about how our words land. For a moment, it looked like things might cool down. Elton relaxed slightly. Colbert smiled carefully. Then, perhaps trying to get back on track, Colbert made a critical mistake. Can I ask you about something else from the documentary? He said. You talked about your relationship with your mother and how complicated that was. There's a scene where you mention the years you didn't speak. Looking back, do you wish you had repaired things sooner? Elton's face hardened instantly. Stephen, my mother passed away several years ago. That relationship and how I choose to remember it is deeply personal. Of course, Colbert said quickly. I'm not trying to pry. I just thought since it was part of the documentary, maybe you'd be open to discussing it. There's a difference, Elton said icily, between choosing to share something on my own terms, in my own film, and being pressed about it on live television. Pressed? Colbert repeated defensively. Sir Elton, I'm not pressing you. I'm interviewing you. Is that what you call it? Elton countered. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like provocation. The audience gasped. Colbert's face reddened. That's not fair. I ask thoughtful questions of all my guests. That's part of having a meaningful conversation. I don't just throw easy ones. Challenging and antagonistic aren't the same thing, Elton snapped. And you crossed that line 10 minutes ago? I disagree, Colbert said sharply. I think you're being overly sensitive because I'm asking you to reflect on uncomfortable truths. The word oversensitive hit like a thunderclap. The room froze. Elton's face went completely still. Did you just call me oversensitive? Colbert's expression changed instantly. I didn't mean it that way. I just meant maybe you're reacting more strongly than the questions deserve. No, Elton said, leaning forward. You said what you said. You think that setting boundaries makes me oversensitive. You think my feelings are the problem? Sir Elton, I'm sorry, Colbert said quickly. That was the wrong word. But the apology sounded forced. Are you sorry you said it? Elton asked. Or sorry that you got called out for it? Because those aren't the same. Colbert sighed, trying to regain his composure. I'm sorry I used that word. It was wrong. But I still believe there's a misunderstanding here about what's appropriate to ask. A misunderstanding? Elton repeated incredulously. You asked about my dead mother. You implied my colleagues enabled my addiction. You pushed me to condemn my own industry. And when I objected, you told me I was oversensitive. And you think this is just a misunderstanding?